I watched my Ring doorbell footage 3 times before my brain could actually process what I was seeing. And when it finally clicked that our HOA president had just stolen my package in broad daylight, I knew my life in Cypress Ridge was about to get very complicated. My name is Marcus Chen, and I had moved into this planned community in suburban Phoenix, Arizona about 8 months ago. The house was perfect. A 3-bedroom ranch style with a decent backyard, reasonable mortgage, and only 20 minutes from my software engineering job downtown. The HOA seemed like a minor inconvenience at the time, something I would deal with when necessary. I had no idea how wrong I could be about that assessment. The package that started everything was supposed to contain a limited edition mechanical keyboard. I had been waiting 3 months to arrive. It was a custom build, something I had ordered from a small maker in Oregon, worth about $600. I had been tracking it obsessively for days, refreshing the delivery page every few hours like some kind of addict. When the notification popped up on my phone at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon saying, "Delivered to front porch," I felt that little rush of excitement that only package arrivals can bring. I was in the middle of a video conference call with my team, discussing a database migration that had been giving us problems for weeks. I saw the Ring notification pop up on my laptop screen, but could not check it right away without being rude to my colleagues. The meeting dragged on for another 40 minutes, filled with the usual technical discussions and debates about implementation strategies. By the time I finally disconnected and pulled up the Ring app to watch my package arrival, I was already feeling that familiar anticipation. The first video showed exactly what I expected. The USPS delivery driver, a guy I had seen dozens of times before, walking up to my porch around 2:45 p.m. He placed the box carefully against the wall next to my front door, scanned it with his device, and walked back to his truck. Standard delivery, nothing unusual. I smiled at the screen, ready to go outside and grab my keyboard. But then I noticed there was another notification, time-stamped at 3:02 p.m., only 15 minutes after delivery. My stomach did a weird little flip because I knew I had not gone outside yet. I clicked on the second video with a growing sense of dread. What I saw made my blood run cold. A woman in her late 40s with that distinctive, "Can I speak to the manager" haircut, wearing yoga pants and a violet tunic, was walking up my driveway with purpose in her stride. She looked directly at the Ring camera, seemed to hesitate for just a second, then reached down and picked up my package. She did not knock on my door. She did not leave a note. She just turned around and walked away with my box tucked under her arm like it belonged to her. I recognized her immediately. Patricia Henderson, president of the Cypress Ridge Homeowners Association and the bane of my existence for the past 8 months. She was the woman who had sent me 17 violation notices in my first 6 months of living there. Apparently, my trash cans were visible from the street for 45 minutes after pickup time. My mailbox needed repainting because there was a tiny chip in the finish. My front lawn had 3 dandelions, which violated the community aesthetics guidelines. The list went on, each complaint more petty than the last. Patricia had made it very clear from the beginning that she ran Cypress Ridge with an iron fist. She walked the neighborhood every single day, clipboard in hand, looking for violations. She had actually knocked on my door at 7 in the morning once to inform me that my newspaper had been sitting in the driveway for 20 minutes, and it was unsightly. I had tried to be polite and accommodating at first, following all her ridiculous rules, but it never seemed to be enough for her. But stealing my package. That was crossing a line I never imagined she would cross. I saved both videos immediately to my phone and my laptop, then backed them up to my cloud storage. I was not taking any chances with this evidence. My hands were shaking slightly as I processed what I had just witnessed. Part of me wanted to march directly to her house, which was only 3 streets over, and confront her immediately. But another part of me, the more rational part, knew that I needed to handle this carefully and properly. I called the non-emergency police line first. The dispatcher listened to my story with what sounded like practiced patience, probably hearing dozens of similar reports every day. She told me that package theft was indeed a crime, but that I should also contact the post office since it was a USPS delivery. She said an officer would come by to take a report within the next few hours. Then I called the local post office and asked to speak to someone about package theft. After being transferred twice, I ended up talking to a man who introduced himself as Robert Williamson, a postal inspector. His voice was serious and professional in a way that made me sit up straighter in my chair. "Mr. Chen, package theft is a federal crime when it involves USPS deliveries," he explained. "We take these cases very seriously. Do you have any evidence of the theft?" "I have crystal clear video footage from my Ring camera," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The person who took it is identifiable. It shows her walking up to my porch and taking the package." "Good, that makes our job much easier. Can you email me that footage?" "I will open an investigation immediately." He gave me his email address, and I sent the videos while we were still on the phone. I heard him clicking through the files on his end. "Mr. Chen, I am looking at your footage now," he said after a moment of silence. "This is very clear evidence. Do you know this individual?" "Yes, sir. She is the president of my homeowners association. Her name is Patricia Henderson. She lives at 4782 Mesquite Lane, which is in the same community." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Robert spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly, becoming more interested. "The HOA president, that is certainly an unusual situation. What was in the package, if you do not mind me asking?" "A custom mechanical keyboard worth about $600. "All right. I am going to need you to file a formal report, which I can email you. Fill it out with all the details you have provided me, including the value of the item and the suspect's information. I will be in touch within 24 hours about next steps." We ended the call, and I immediately started filling out the report he sent over. As I was typing, there was a knock at my door. I looked at my Ring app and saw a Phoenix Police Patrol car in my driveway. That was faster than I expected. The officer was a woman in her 30s named Officer Sarah Mitchell, according to her name badge. She was professional and thorough, taking down all the information I provided and watching the Ring footage on her tablet. She seemed genuinely annoyed on my behalf when she saw Patricia clearly taking my package. "HOA president, huh?" Officer Mitchell shook her head. "I have heard some stories about HOAs in this area, but this is pretty blatant. The good news is you have excellent evidence. The bad news is that since this involves USPS, it is going to be primarily a federal matter. I will file this report with our department, but the postal inspector will be taking the lead on prosecution." "The postal inspector already has my information," I confirmed. "I spoke with Robert Williamson earlier." "Good, he is solid, he will handle this properly." She handed me a copy of the police report. "In the meantime, I would recommend not confronting this woman directly. Let the legal process handle it. People can get unpredictable when they are accused of crimes, even if the evidence is clear." I agreed, though part of me was still burning with the desire to go knock on Patricia's door and demand my keyboard back. After Officer Mitchell left, I sat in my living room staring at my phone, refreshing my email every few minutes like the postal inspector might suddenly send me an update. Of course, nothing came through that evening. Federal investigations do not move that quickly, even with clear evidence. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the video in my mind, watching Patricia walk up my driveway with that entitled stride, looking right at the camera before taking what belonged to me. What was she thinking? Did she really believe she could just take my package without consequences? Or did she think that being HOA president gave her some kind of immunity? The next morning, I was bleary-eyed and exhausted as I made coffee and tried to focus on work. I had 3 meetings scheduled and a code review that needed my attention, but my mind kept wandering back to the situation. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered it quickly. "Mr. Chen, this is Robert Williamson, the postal inspector we spoke with yesterday. Do you have a few minutes to discuss your case?" "Yes, absolutely," I said, stepping away from my desk and into my bedroom where I could close the door and have privacy. "I have reviewed your footage multiple times, and I have also pulled delivery records for your address. Everything confirms your account of events. I have opened a formal investigation into Patricia Henderson for mail theft under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1708. This is a federal crime that can carry penalties of up to 5 years in prison and significant fines." My eyebrows shot up. 5 years? I had not expected it to be that serious. What happens next? "I need to conduct an interview with Miss Henderson and give her an opportunity to provide her side of the story. I will also attempt to recover your property. However, I want to be clear with you. This is now a criminal investigation. If she admits to taking the package or if we find it in her possession, I will be referring charges to the U.S. Attorney's Office for Prosecution." "I understand," I said, my heart pounding. This was getting very real very quickly. "I will be contacting Miss Henderson today to arrange an interview. I will keep you updated on the progress. In the meantime, if she attempts to contact you or return the package directly, please let me know immediately. Do not accept any offers of settlement or restitution without informing me first." After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of vindication and nervousness. I wanted Patricia to face consequences for stealing from me, but the reality of a federal criminal investigation felt heavy. This was not just about my keyboard anymore. This was about the law and the principle that no one, not even an HOA president, was above it. I tried to focus on work for the rest of the day, but it was nearly impossible. Every notification made me jump, thinking it might be an update. By early evening, I gave up on being productive and went for a run through the neighborhood, taking a deliberately long route that avoided Mesquite Lane. I did not want to accidentally run into Patricia before the postal inspector had a chance to interview her. The following day was Thursday, and I woke up to an email from Robert Williamson sent at 7 in the morning. My pulse quickened as I opened it. "Mr. Chen, I attempted to contact Patricia Henderson yesterday evening by phone and received no answer. I went to her residence this morning at 8 a.m. and conducted an interview. Miss Henderson initially denied taking any package from your property. When I showed her the Ring camera footage, she changed her story. She claims she took the package because she believed it was delivered to the wrong address, and she was attempting to help by holding it until she could verify the correct recipient. However, she could not explain why she did not knock on your door first or leave any note explaining what she had done. When I asked her to produce the package, she stated that it was somewhere in her garage and she would need time to locate it. I have given her until 5 p.m. today to surrender the package to me. If she fails to do so, I will be seeking a search warrant for her property. I will update you this evening regardless of the outcome." I read the email 3 times, my anger building with each pass. She believed it was the wrong address. My house number was clearly visible on the package, and the USPS driver had delivered it correctly. Even if she had somehow been confused, why would not she knock on my door or leave a note? The excuse was transparently false, and I was glad the postal inspector seemed to see through it. I forwarded the email to Officer Mitchell, who had given me her contact information in case I needed to follow up on the police report. She responded quickly with a brief message. Classic deflection. Let the PI handle it. He knows what he is doing. The day dragged by with agonizing slowness. I kept checking my phone every 15 minutes, watching the clock tick toward 5 p.m. When 6 o'clock came and went with no update, I started to worry. Had Patricia refused to turn over the package, was Robert getting a search warrant right now? At 7:32 p.m., my phone finally rang. Mr. Chen, Robert Williamson, I wanted to update you on today's developments. Miss Henderson did surrender your package to me at approximately 4:45 p.m. this evening. However, the package had been opened. The contents appear to be intact based on your description, but I need you to verify that nothing is missing or damaged. She opened it. I felt a fresh wave of anger wash over me. It was not enough to steal it, she had to open it too. Yes. When I asked her why she opened a package that allegedly was not hers, she stated that she needed to check the contents to determine who it belonged to. Again, her explanation does not hold up to scrutiny, as your address was clearly labeled on the outside of the package. I have photographed everything as evidence. Can you meet me tomorrow morning at the post office on Baseline Road at 9 a.m. to retrieve your property and verify its condition? Yes, I will be there. Thank you for getting it back. Mr. Chen, I want to be clear about what happens next. Based on my investigation, I have sufficient evidence to recommend federal charges against Miss Henderson for mail theft. The fact that she opened the package actually strengthens the case, as it demonstrates clear intent and consciousness of guilt. Her explanations were contradictory and not credible. I will be forwarding my complete report to the U.S. Attorney's Office next week with a recommendation for prosecution. So she will actually be charged, I asked, needing to hear it confirmed. Yes. I cannot guarantee exactly what charges the U.S. Attorney will decide to file, but based on the evidence, I would expect at minimum 1 count of mail theft. She will likely be arrested and arraigned within the next few weeks. After we ended the call, I sat in my car in my driveway for a long time, processing everything. Patricia Henderson, the woman who had made my life miserable with her petty HOA complaints for 8 months, was going to be arrested for stealing my package. Part of me felt a deep satisfaction at the justice of it all. Another part of me felt slightly stunned that it had escalated this far. I went inside and poured myself a bourbon, something I rarely did on a weeknight, and sat on my back patio watching the sun disappear behind the houses across the way. The Arizona sky was doing its usual spectacular display of oranges and purples, but I barely registered it. My mind was spinning with thoughts about what would happen next, how the neighborhood would react, and whether Patricia would retaliate somehow before she was arrested. The next morning, I drove to the post office on Baseline Road and found Robert Williamson waiting for me in a small conference room. He was exactly what I had pictured based on his voice, probably in his mid-50s, with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He shook my hand firmly and gestured to the table where my package sat, still in an evidence bag. "Go ahead and open it, verify everything is there," he said, sliding it across to me. I carefully removed the package from the evidence bag and examined it. The box had been sliced open along the top with what looked like a knife or box cutter. Inside, wrapped in bubble wrap, was my keyboard. I lifted it out gently and inspected it from every angle. It appeared undamaged, all the custom keycaps were in place, and the braided cable was neatly coiled underneath. I plugged it into my laptop, which I had brought with me, and tested every key. Everything worked perfectly. "It is all here and undamaged," I confirmed, feeling a wave of relief. Good. I need you to sign this form confirming receipt of your property. The packaging will remain as evidence, but you can take the keyboard home today. He slid a document across the table and I signed where he indicated. What happens now? I asked as I carefully packed the keyboard into my backpack. Now I finish my report and submit it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They will review the evidence and make a determination on charges. Based on the strength of this case, I expect they will file charges within 2 weeks. Once charges are filed, a warrant will be issued for Miss Henderson's arrest. She will be arrested by U.S. Marshals or federal agents brought in for booking and then arraigned before a federal magistrate judge. At the arraignment, she will enter a plea and conditions of release will be set. Will I have to testify or anything? Possibly if the case goes to trial. However, many defendants plead guilty when the evidence is this clear. The video footage is extremely compelling. Most defense attorneys would advise their clients to negotiate a plea rather than risk a trial. He paused, studying me carefully. Mr. Chen, I want to prepare you for something. When Miss Henderson is arrested, this is going to become public. Federal arrests are matters of public record. There may be media attention, especially given that she is an HOA president. Your neighborhood will definitely find out. Are you prepared for that? I had not really thought about that aspect, but I nodded. I did not do anything wrong. She stole from me. If people judge me for reporting a crime, that is their problem. Robert smiled slightly. That is the right attitude. Some people feel guilty when someone faces consequences for their own actions. Do not fall into that trap. You are the victim here. We shook hands again, and I left the post office with my keyboard finally in my possession. As I drove home, I felt a strange sense of unreality about the whole situation. Just 3 days ago, I was a guy excited about getting a package. Now I was a witness in a federal criminal case against my HOA president. The weekend passed quietly. I kept a low profile, staying inside mostly and working on some personal coding projects. I did not see Patricia during my occasional glances out the window, though I did notice her car was in her driveway. I wondered if she knew what was coming, if Robert had told her that he was recommending charges. She had to know, right? You do not get interviewed by a postal inspector without understanding that you might be in serious trouble. Monday morning, I was in the middle of a code review when my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. This is Patricia Henderson. We need to talk about this situation immediately. What you are doing is ridiculous and vindictive. I made a simple mistake, and you are trying to ruin my life. I am willing to compensate you for your keyboard if you drop this investigation. Call me. I stared at the text in disbelief. Was she seriously trying to negotiate with me now after everything? And how did she even get my phone number? Probably from HOA records, I realized with a grimace. I screenshotted the text immediately and forwarded it to Robert Williamson with a brief message explaining that Patricia had contacted me attempting to settle. He called me within 10 minutes. Mr. Chen, do not respond to her text. This is actually helpful for our case. She is essentially admitting guilt by offering compensation and asking you to drop the investigation. It shows consciousness of guilt. If she sends any more messages, screenshot them and send them to me, but do not engage with her at all. She called it a simple mistake, I said, still annoyed. There was nothing simple or mistaken about walking up to my porch and taking my package. I know, her story keeps changing, which is another red flag. First she denied taking it, then she claimed she thought it was the wrong address. Now she is calling it a mistake. None of that will help her case. Just stay the course and let the legal process work. I blocked Patricia's number after we hung up, not wanting to deal with any more of her attempts at manipulation. The text had actually made me angrier than I had been before. The sheer audacity of her reaching out to me, trying to frame herself as the victim in this situation, was infuriating. Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from Robert again. Mr. Chen, I wanted to give you a heads up. The U.S. Attorney's Office has reviewed my report and has decided to file charges. Patricia Henderson is being charged with 1 count of mail theft under 18 U.S.C. Section 1708. A warrant has been issued for her arrest. She will likely be arrested tomorrow morning. I wanted you to know in advance so you are not surprised when it happens. My stomach did a little flip. This was really happening. Thank you for letting me know. One more thing, the U.S. Attorney's Office asked me to pass along that they may need you to provide a victim impact statement at some point in the proceedings, either for sentencing or during plea negotiations. It is nothing to worry about right now, just something to be aware of. Wednesday morning, I was working from home as usual. Around 9:30, I noticed unusual activity on my street through my front window. A dark sedan with government plates pulled up 3 houses down from mine, and 2 people in plain clothes got out. Even from a distance, I could tell they were law enforcement of some kind. They had that unmistakable bearing. I opened my Ring app and switched to the live view, zooming in as much as the camera would allow. I watched as they walked up to Patricia's front door and knocked. After a moment, the door opened. I could not hear what was being said, but I saw Patricia's face go pale even from the camera's distance. One of the agents appeared to be talking to her, probably explaining why they were there. Then I saw her step outside and one of the agents moved behind her. She was being handcuffed. I felt a complicated rush of emotions watching it happen. Vindication, certainly, justice being served. But also something darker, a sense of finality and seriousness that made my chest feel tight. This was not just about my keyboard anymore. This was a woman's life being fundamentally changed because of choices she made. Patricia was led to the sedan, placed in the back seat, and driven away. The whole thing took maybe 5 minutes. A few neighbors had come out of their houses, drawn by the unusual activity. I saw people talking to each other, pointing at Patricia's house, clearly confused and curious about what had just happened. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Text messages from neighbors I barely knew, asking if I knew what happened to Patricia. Someone had already created a group chat speculating about federal agents in the neighborhood. I ignored all of it. This was not my story to tell publicly, not yet. An hour later, Robert called me. Miss Henderson was arrested this morning without incident and is currently being processed. She will be arraigned this afternoon at the federal courthouse downtown. The arraignment is public record if you want to attend, but it is not necessary. What will happen at the arraignment? She will be formally advised of the charges, asked to enter a plea, and the magistrate judge will set conditions of release. Given that this is a non-violent offense, and she has no prior criminal record based on our background check, she will likely be released on her own recognizance with some conditions. Standard conditions usually include not leaving the state and staying away from the victim, which means she should not contact you or come to your property. How long does this process take? The whole case, I mean. It varies. If she pleads guilty, it could be resolved in a few months. If she fights it and goes to trial, it could be a year or more. But honestly, with the video evidence and her contradictory statements, I would be surprised if her attorney advises anything other than a plea deal. That afternoon, I could not help myself. I looked up the federal court records online and found Patricia's case. Sure enough, she had been arraigned at 2 p.m. She pled not guilty, which was standard at this stage according to what I had read. She was released on her own recognizance with conditions that included no contact with me and a restriction on travel outside of Arizona without court approval. She also had to surrender her passport. The neighborhood group chat exploded when someone figured out what Patricia had been arrested for. Apparently, federal court records were easier to search than I had realized. My name was not mentioned in the public records, thankfully, but people quickly put together that someone in the neighborhood had filed a complaint about package theft. My doorbell rang around 6 p.m. I checked the Ring camera and saw my next-door neighbor, an older man named Frank, who I had spoken to maybe 3 times since moving in. I debated not answering, but he seemed harmless enough. "Marcus, hey," Frank said when I opened the door. He looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to check in with you. We heard about Patricia getting arrested for package theft. Someone said it might have been from this street based on the court documents. Was it your package?" I hesitated, then figured there was no point in lying. It would come out eventually. "Yeah, it was mine. She stole a package off my porch. I had video evidence from my Ring camera." Frank's eyes widened. "Jesus, I know she could be intense about HOA stuff, but stealing? That is crazy." "It was pretty clear on video. She walked up, took the package, and left. Didn't knock or leave a note or anything." "Good for you for reporting it." "A lot of people would have just let it go to avoid drama." He paused. "You know the HOA board is probably going to have to figure out what to do about her position now. She cannot really be president while facing federal charges." I had not even thought about that aspect. I guess that is for the board to decide. I just wanted my property back and for there to be consequences for theft. We talked for a few more minutes before Frank headed back to his house. Over the next several days, more neighbors stopped by or sent messages expressing support or curiosity. A few people were clearly on Patricia's side, suggesting that I had overreacted or that I should have just talked to her first. Those people got polite but firm responses from me explaining that theft is theft, and no one is entitled to take other people's property regardless of their position in the community. The HOA board held an emergency meeting the following week. I received notice of it like all homeowners, though the agenda was vague, just listing board leadership discussion as the main item. I decided to attend via the Zoom link they provided, curious about what would happen. The meeting was tense from the start. The 4 other board members looked uncomfortable as they addressed the situation. Richard, the vice president, did most of the talking. "As you all know, Patricia Henderson is facing legal issues that make it impossible for her to continue in her role as HOA president. The board has voted to remove her from the position effective immediately. I will be serving as interim president until we can hold a proper election." There were questions from other homeowners, some supportive of Patricia, others critical. Someone asked if the HOA was providing legal support for her. Richard explained that the board had consulted with their attorney and determined that since Patricia's alleged actions were personal in nature and not related to her HOA duties, the association would not be covering her legal costs. Patricia herself was not on the call, which made sense given that she probably had a court order not to contact me and I was in the virtual meeting room. I stayed quiet throughout the whole thing, not wanting to draw attention to myself or engage in any debates. After the meeting, I received an email from Richard asking if I would be willing to speak with him privately about what happened. I agreed, and we set up a phone call for the next day. "Marcus, I want to start by apologizing on behalf of the board," Richard said when we connected. "What happened to you was completely unacceptable. Patricia's behavior was not representative of what this community should be about." "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "I also want you to know that the board is reviewing all of the violation notices that Patricia issued over the past year. We have received complaints from several homeowners that she was overly aggressive and sometimes cited violations that did not actually exist in our CC and Articus. We are going to be taking a different approach going forward, focusing on actual community issues rather than nitpicking," That was welcome news. That sounds like a positive change. If you are ever interested in joining the board, we could use someone with your perspective. Someone who understands that HOAs should serve the community, not police it obsessively. I told him I would think about it, though I was not sure I wanted that level of involvement in neighborhood politics. Still, it was nice to be asked and to know that Patricia's removal was leading to real changes in how the HOA operated. The legal case moved forward over the next several weeks. Patricia hired a criminal defense attorney, and there were various motions and filings that I followed through the online court records. Her attorney tried to get the video evidence suppressed, arguing that the Ring camera violated Patricia's reasonable expectation of privacy. The motion was denied quickly. A person walking up to someone else's front porch in a public neighborhood has no reasonable expectation of privacy, according to the magistrate judge's ruling. In late June, about 3 months after the original theft, Robert called me with news. "Mr. Chen, Patricia Henderson has accepted a plea deal. She is pleading guilty to 1 count of mail theft." In exchange for her guilty plea, the U.S. attorney has agreed to recommend a sentence of 6 months home detention, 2 years of supervised probation, and restitution for the value of your keyboard plus shipping costs. She will also have to complete community service. The sentencing hearing is scheduled for August 15th, so no prison time. I asked, feeling slightly disappointed but also understanding that 6 months of home detention was still a significant consequence. No prison time, but home detention is serious. She will have to wear an ankle monitor and cannot leave her house, except for approved reasons like work, medical appointments, and her required probation meetings. It is essentially house arrest. And the conviction will be on her permanent record as a federal crime, which will impact her employment prospects and other aspects of her life. When does she officially plead guilty? The plea hearing is next week. After she enters the plea, it is just a matter of waiting for the sentencing hearing. You will have the opportunity to provide a victim impact statement at sentencing if you choose. I recommend doing it. The judge will want to hear how this affected you. I agreed to provide a statement. Over the next week, I drafted and revised it multiple times, trying to strike the right tone. I did not want to be vindictive or over the top, but I wanted the judge to understand that this was not a victimless crime. Patricia's actions had made me feel violated in my own home, had cost me time and stress dealing with the legal process, and had broken the basic trust that neighbors should have in each other. The plea hearing happened as scheduled, and Patricia formally pled guilty. I did not attend, seeing no reason to take time off work for what was essentially a procedural formality. But I followed the case online and saw the official entry of her guilty plea in the court records. August 15th arrived with typical Phoenix summer heat, the kind that makes you question why humans decided to build a major city in the desert. I took the morning off work and drove downtown to the federal courthouse. I had been inside once before for a naturalization ceremony for a friend, but this was my first time in the criminal courtroom. The courthouse was impressive and intimidating in equal measure, all marble and high ceilings and serious-faced people moving with purpose. I went through security, found the correct courtroom, and took a seat in the gallery. There were a few other people scattered around, probably family members or friends of Patricia, or maybe people involved in other cases on the docket. Patricia arrived with her attorney about 10 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to start. She looked diminished somehow, smaller than I remembered. Her hair was not styled the way it usually was, and she wore a conservative navy dress that seemed designed to make her look sympathetic. She did not look in my direction, though she must have known I was there. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Linda Ramirez, entered the courtroom and we all stood. The formalities began, with Patricia's attorney making arguments about her lack of criminal history, her contributions to the community through her HOA work, and her remorse for what happened. He painted her as someone who made a terrible mistake, but was not a danger to society. Then it was the prosecutor's turn, an assistant U.S. attorney who laid out the facts of the case in stark terms. Patricia had committed theft, lied about it initially, and only returned the stolen property when faced with consequences. The video evidence was played on a monitor for the judge, showing Patricia clearly taking my package and walking away with it. Then Judge Ramirez asked if I wanted to provide my victim impact statement. I stood up, my hands slightly shaky, and approached the lectern. Your Honor, my name is Marcus Chen, and I am the victim in this case. 3 months ago, I was excited about receiving a package I had waited months for. Instead of that simple joy, I experienced violation, anger, and a loss of security in my own home. Patricia Henderson did not just steal a keyboard from me, she stole my peace of mind. She stole the basic trust that my property would be safe on my own porch. And she did all of this as someone who held a position of authority in my neighborhood, someone who was supposed to be looking out for the community, not exploiting her knowledge of it to commit crimes. I paused, gathering my thoughts. What made this worse was her response when caught. She lied about taking the package, then she made up a story about thinking it was delivered to the wrong address. Then she opened the package, violating my privacy even further. And even after all of that, she tried to contact me to make this go away, to buy her way out of consequences. None of those actions show remorse. They show someone who thought she could get away with it and was upset that she could not. I looked at Patricia, who was staring at the table in front of her, refusing to meet my eyes. I do not take any pleasure in being here today. I did not want to be involved in a federal criminal case. I just wanted my package. But when someone steals from you and shows no genuine remorse, what choice do you have except to let justice take its course? I hope that whatever sentence you impose, Your Honor, sends a clear message that no one is above the law, regardless of their position in the community. I returned to my seat, my heart pounding. Judge Ramirez made some notes, then looked up at Patricia. Miss Henderson, would you like to make a statement? Patricia stood, her voice shaky when she spoke. Your Honor, I am deeply sorry for what I did. It was wrong, and I have no excuse for it. I let my emotions get the better of me, and I made a terrible decision that I regret every single day. I hope Mr. Chen can forgive me someday, and I am prepared to accept whatever consequences you decide are appropriate. It was a decent apology, I supposed, though it felt a bit rehearsed. And notably, she did not actually explain why she did it or what emotions she was referring to. That seemed like a deliberate choice by her attorney to avoid saying anything that might make it worse. Judge Ramirez spent several minutes reviewing the pre-sentencing report and the plea agreement. Then she looked up and began her ruling. Mail theft is a serious federal crime, Miss Henderson. The postal system relies on public trust. When people steal mail or packages, they undermine that trust and violate federal law that has existed for over a century. The fact that you held a position of community leadership makes this particularly troubling. You were supposed to be someone that your neighbors could rely on, and instead, you violated that trust in the most basic way. She paused, adjusting her glasses. However, I also note that you have no prior criminal history, that you eventually returned the stolen property, and that you have accepted responsibility by pleading guilty. The plea agreement calls for 6 months of home detention, 2 years of supervised probation, restitution, and community service. Having reviewed everything, I find that sentence appropriate. I am therefore sentencing you to 6 months of home detention beginning September 1st, followed by 24 months of supervised probation. You will pay restitution in the amount of $673 to Mr. Chen, covering the cost of the keyboard and shipping. You will also complete 200 hours of community service during your probation period. She went on to detail the specific conditions: the ankle monitor, the restrictions on leaving her home, the requirement to maintain employment or seek employment, the prohibition on contacting me, and various other standard probation terms. Patricia would have to check in with a probation officer monthly and could be subjected to random drug testing. She was also required to attend counseling to address what the judge called the impulse control issues that led to this criminal conduct. The hearing concluded and everyone filed out of the courtroom. I felt a strange sense of closure mixed with exhaustion. It was over. Patricia had been held accountable. Justice had been served, at least in the legal sense. As I walked out of the courthouse into the brutal August heat, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard, the interim HOA president. Heard about the sentencing. Board is formally removing Patricia from HOA membership per our bylaws. She will need to resign from any committees or positions immediately. Wanted you to know. I sent back a brief thanks and headed to my car. The drive home gave me time to process everything that had happened over the past 4 months. What started with a stolen package had ended with federal charges, a guilty plea, and my HOA president being sentenced to home detention. It felt surreal. Over the following weeks, life slowly returned to normal. Patricia's house had fewer cars visiting, and I occasionally saw her outside during what I assumed were her approved times to leave for work or appointments. She never looked in my direction when our paths occasionally crossed at a distance, and I was fine with that. The neighborhood dynamics shifted too. Without Patricia's constant enforcement of every tiny rule, people relaxed a bit. Trash cans stayed visible for an extra hour sometimes. A few dandelions appeared in yards. The community did not descend into chaos like Patricia had probably predicted. Instead, it just became a normal neighborhood where people lived their lives without obsessing over minor aesthetic violations. The restitution check arrived in late September, delivered via certified mail from Patricia's attorney's office. $673, exactly as ordered. I deposited it and used part of the money to upgrade my home security system, adding cameras to my backyard and side entrances. The keyboard that started it all still sat on my desk, working perfectly, though I could never quite use it without thinking about everything that happened. In October, I got a call from Robert Williamson, the postal inspector who had handled the case. Mr. Chen, I wanted to follow up with you and let you know that Patricia Henderson is complying with all the terms of her sentence. No violations, no issues with the home detention. I also wanted to thank you for being so cooperative throughout this investigation. Many victims of mail theft do not have the kind of evidence you provided, which makes our job much harder. I am glad I had the Ring camera, I said, otherwise it would have just been my word against hers. Exactly. Cases like yours are why we encourage people to have doorbell cameras and to report package theft promptly. It is not a victimless crime, and federal law takes it seriously for good reason. We chatted for a few more minutes before ending the call. His words stayed with me, though. I had not set out to be any kind of crusader for justice. I just wanted my keyboard back. But by following through with the legal process, by not accepting Patricia's attempts to make it go away quietly, I had probably discouraged her from ever doing something like this again. And maybe other potential package thieves in the neighborhood got the message too. November brought cooler weather and the HOA elections that Richard had promised. Several neighbors I had gotten to know over the past months ran for board positions, including Frank from next door. I still declined to run myself, feeling like I had had enough HOA drama to last a lifetime. but I voted for candidates who seemed reasonable and focused on actual community needs rather than nitpicking violations. The new board was elected, with Richard staying on as president by popular vote. One of their first actions was to revise the community guidelines to focus on genuine issues like property maintenance and safety, rather than the aesthetic obsessiveness that Patricia had championed. They also implemented a process for homeowners to appeal violation notices, something that had not existed before. December arrived with holiday decorations going up around the neighborhood. I put up lights on my house, something I had avoided the previous year, because Patricia had sent me a 4-page document detailing the exact specifications for acceptable holiday decorations. This year, I just hung them however I wanted, and nobody sent me any nasty letters. On a Saturday afternoon in mid-December, I was outside cleaning leaves out of my front yard when a woman I did not recognize approached me from the sidewalk. "Excuse me, are you Marcus Chen?" She asked politely. "Yes, can I help you?" "I am Jennifer Moore. I live over on Cottonwood Drive." She gestured vaguely toward the other side of the neighborhood. "I wanted to thank you for what you did with Patricia Henderson. She had been making my life miserable for 2 years with her ridiculous violations and threats of fines. When you actually held her accountable for stealing from you, it changed everything. The new board is so much better." I was a bit taken aback. "I just reported a crime. I did not set out to change the HOA or anything." "I know, but it had that effect anyway. Sometimes it takes one person standing up to a bully for everyone else to realize they don't have to put up with it." She smiled. "So thank you. My family is much happier here now." After she left, I stood in my front yard for a while, thinking about her words. I had been so focused on my own situation, on getting justice for the theft of my package, that I had not really considered the broader impact. But she was right. Patricia had been a bully, using her position to harass people over minor issues, and nobody had really stood up to her until circumstances forced a confrontation. Christmas came and went peacefully. I video-called my parents in California and my sister in Texas, filling them in on the whole saga. My mother was horrified that anyone would steal packages, and my sister laughed at the idea of an HOA president getting arrested by federal agents. My father, ever practical, just asked if I had gotten my money back and if the keyboard still worked. January brought a new year and new routines. Patricia's home detention ended in early March, transitioning her to the supervised probation phase. I saw her occasionally at the grocery store or driving past in her car, but we maintained our mutual avoidance. She had moved on with her life, and I had moved on with mine. The Ring camera that had captured everything continued to sit above my door, recording every delivery and every person who approached my porch. I checked it religiously now whenever a package was delivered, probably more than necessary, but old habits die hard. The keyboard sat on my desk at home, still working perfectly, its custom keycaps clicking away as I wrote code or played games. In late March, almost exactly a year after the theft, I received a formal letter from the U.S. Probation Office informing me that Patricia Henderson had completed her community service requirement and was in compliance with all terms of her probation. The letter noted that I could contact them if I had any concerns about her behavior, or if she violated the no-contact order. I filed the letter away in the folder I kept with all the documents from the case, which had grown surprisingly thick over the past year. Spring arrived in Phoenix with its brief window of perfect weather before the summer heat returned. The neighborhood continued to thrive under the new HOA board leadership. There were community events again, things that Patricia had always vetoed as too much liability or not in keeping with community standards. We had a spring barbecue in the neighborhood park, and I actually met more of my neighbors in that one afternoon than I had in the entire previous year. Frank, my next-door neighbor who had been elected to the HOA board, stopped by one evening with a six-pack of beer and an update. "Thought you should know, Patricia officially moved out last week," he said as we sat on my back patio. "She sold the house. Guess she decided it was too awkward to stay in the neighborhood after everything that happened." "Can't say I am surprised," I replied. "Must have been hard living here while on probation for stealing from a neighbor. The new owners seem nice, young couple with a baby." They were asking about the neighborhood, and I gave them the full honest rundown. Told them about the Patricia situation too, so they know the HOA had some issues, but it is better now. We talked for a while longer about neighborhood gossip and HOA business before he headed home. After he left, I thought about Patricia moving away, starting over somewhere else. I wondered if she had learned anything from the experience or if she just felt like a victim of circumstances. Either way, it was not my problem anymore. By summer, the whole incident had faded into neighborhood lore. New residents heard the story from longtime neighbors, usually told with a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Can you believe our old HOA president got arrested for stealing a package?" It became one of those cautionary tales that people shared at parties, or used to explain why our HOA was so much more relaxed than others in the area. For me, it became a story I told when the topic of HOA nightmares came up, which happened surprisingly often in conversations with other homeowners. People always ask the same questions. "Did you really have her arrested? Wasn't that a bit extreme?" And I always gave the same answer. She committed a federal crime, got caught on camera, lied about it, and tried to make it go away quietly. What was I supposed to do? Just let it slide because she was HOA president? Most people understood once they heard the full story. A few still thought I should have handled it differently, that I could have just talked to her first or accepted her late offers to make amends. Those people usually revealed themselves to be the type who avoid conflict at all costs, who would rather absorb injustice than deal with the messy reality of holding people accountable. I understood that impulse, but I did not share it. The keyboard continued to serve me well, outlasting the drama that surrounded its delivery. Every time I sat down at my desk to work or game, my fingers flying across the custom keycaps, I was reminded of the strange journey that package had taken. From Oregon to my porch to Patricia's garage to a postal inspector's evidence room and finally to my desk. It had probably traveled more interesting places than most keyboards ever would. As I sit here now, more than a year after that Tuesday afternoon when I watched Ring camera footage of Patricia Henderson stealing my package, I have had time to reflect on everything that happened. Would I do anything differently if I could go back? Honestly, no. I reported a crime, cooperated with law enforcement, and let the justice system work. Patricia made her choices, and she faced the consequences. The fact that those consequences disrupted her life and her position in the community was her responsibility, not mine. The neighborhood is better for it, too. We have an HOA that actually serves the community instead of tyrannizing it. We have neighbors who feel comfortable talking to each other, instead of living in fear of violation notices. And we have a collective understanding that no one, regardless of their position or perceived authority, is above the law. Sometimes I still get packages delivered, and each time I hear that Ring notification, there is a tiny moment of anxiety before I check the camera and see it is just the normal delivery driver doing their job. That anxiety probably will not ever fully go away, which is frustrating. Patricia's actions created a lasting impact beyond the immediate theft, a small trauma that manifests as hypervigilance about package deliveries. But I also take satisfaction in knowing that I stood up for myself, and for the principle that actions have consequences. In a world where it often feels like powerful people get away with everything, where HOA boards and petty tyrants rule their small kingdoms without accountability, my case was a reminder that justice can still prevail when you have evidence and the willingness to follow through. The legal system worked the way it was supposed to work. The postal inspector took the case seriously. The U.S. attorney filed appropriate charges. The judge imposed a fair sentence that balanced punishment with Patricia's lack of criminal history. And through it all, I was treated with respect as a victim who deserved justice. Looking back now, I realize that the story was never really about a keyboard, despite the keyboard being the catalyst for everything. It was about respect, boundaries, and the social contracts we have with each other as neighbors and community members. Patricia violated all of those when she walked up my driveway and took something that did not belong to her. The federal charge and conviction were simply the formal recognition of that violation and the consequences that necessarily followed. My life has returned to normal now, whatever normal means. I work my software engineering job, hang out with friends, enjoy my hobbies including that keyboard that caused so much chaos. The HOA sends occasional emails about community events and actual important matters. But gone are the days of weekly violation notices about trash, cans being visible, or dandelions existing. The neighborhood feels like a community again rather than a police state. And somewhere in Arizona, Patricia Henderson is completing her probation, working, living her life with a federal conviction on her record. I do not wish her ill. I hope she learned something from the experience and will never steal from anyone again. But whether she did or did not learn that lesson is not my concern. I did what I needed to do to protect myself and my property, and I can live with the outcomes of those decisions. The Ring camera still watches my porch, recording every movement, every delivery, every person who approaches my door. It has become my silent guardian, my insurance policy against future theft. And while I hope I never need that footage again for anything more serious than verifying a delivery time, I am grateful it exists. Technology has given us tools to protect ourselves and to hold people accountable in ways that were not possible before. This whole experience taught me that standing up for yourself matters, even when it is uncomfortable or creates conflict. It taught me that position and authority do not grant immunity from consequences. And it taught me that sometimes the small violations, the package thefts and petty crimes, reveal larger character flaws in people who hold power over others. Would I recommend that everyone pursue federal charges against their HOA president if they steal a package? That is a personal decision each person has to make based on their circumstances, their evidence, and their willingness to engage with the legal process. But I would absolutely recommend documenting everything, reporting crimes when they occur, and not letting people guilt you into dropping legitimate complaints just because it makes others uncomfortable. Justice is not always neat or comfortable. It often creates waves and disrupts established dynamics. People who benefit from the status quo will always argue for letting things slide, for not making a big deal, for resolving things quietly. But sometimes making a big deal is exactly what needs to happen. Sometimes the only way to stop bad behavior is to impose real consequences, no matter how uncomfortable that makes everyone involved. As I finish writing this, a package notification pops up on my phone. I pull up the Ring app and watch the delivery driver place a box on my porch and walk away. No one else approaches. The package sits safely where it was left. I will go outside in a moment and bring it inside, and that will be the end of it. Just a normal delivery on a normal day in a neighborhood that has finally found some peace after the chaos of the past year. The keyboard that started it all sits within reach, its keys gleaming under my desk lamp. Tomorrow I will use it for work, my fingers dancing across its surface as I write code and attend meetings. It is just a keyboard now, an excellent tool that I enjoy using. But it will always carry the memory of that surreal period when a package delivery turned into a federal case, when an HOA president's poor decision led to her downfall, and when I learned that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting the chaos that follows.